A lot of offices are still in the stone age of using an analog workflow where they're pouring goopy impression material into patients' mouths to capture what is in that patient's mouth, instead of using a digital workflow.
Most GP offices don't realize that their staff puts up barriers for their patients coming in. They put up insurance barriers, they put up treatment barriers, they put up all these barriers to prevent certain kinds of patients from coming in. And in full arch, you cannot do that.
9 times out of 10, you're not going to convince that patient immediately to accept treatment and to hand over $30,000. They're going to want to price shop. I mean, it's just the world that we live in. They're going to go to at least 2 to 3 offices, most studies show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Full Arch Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more full arch cases so you can grow the way that you want, but you can't grow if you don't know how to sell. And today I have Brett, who is the founder at Chi Rho Consulting, and he's going to break down the 4 things that you have to have in your office to close these kinds of patients. And I got a lot of value out of this, and I'm sure you will too, especially the last point about trauma bonding. It was a very, very interesting take. Stay tuned for this one. All right, Brett, we are live, and I'm excited to have a conversation with you today. We've had a couple conversations offline, and I love some of the stuff that you're doing, and I want you to kind of share that with our audience. So why don't you tell us the number one thing that you're seeing that's helping dental offices grow when it comes to full arch?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gary, for having me on too. I appreciate the time. I've been in the full arch space now for the last 4.5 years. And the biggest thing that I've seen that differentiates kind of the successful office versus the office that's healthy but not thriving is really an emphasis on the sales side of things. I think sales has always been a little bit of a slimy word in the past. And as clinicians, right, clinicians have gone to school to be in the business of treating patients, right? They did not go to school to sell a product. And even though it is a service, it is a healthcare treatment, in a lot of ways, it is a product that we're selling. We're in the aesthetics business. We're in the business, I call it the business of moments. We're creating a radically life-changing transformation for this patient. And in a lot of ways, we need to, I wouldn't say sell them, but we need to persuade them that this is a decision they need to make and that it is worth the $30,000, $60,000 if they're doing a full mouth reconstruction, that it's worth that amount of money. And you cannot convince or persuade someone of that unless you kind of go to sales school and have at least a rudimentary understanding of the sales process and identifying a prospect, qualifying a prospect, bringing them in for a treatment. And again, skillfully separating them from $30,000, $60,000 of their dollars. It is not a natural act to be able to do that well. And so the offices that are thriving are the ones that are doing that really, really well. So to answer your question in more brief way, yes, it's a focus on the sales piece of things.
Hey, I got a public service announcement for you real quick, and then we'll get back to the show. So the number one thing that people struggle with when they do full arch is that they can't sell the cases, no matter what the marketing does, no matter how good the dentist is, no matter how smooth your process is. Everything is about sales inside of the office. And if you want to close more, you have to learn how to sell full arch. And it's very, very specialized, and it's different than anything else in the dental industry. I had the opportunity to go in and use Stacy's playbook with our clients, and our clients have doubled their full arch sales with this course. And it's been amazing. Now, Stacy sells 60 arches every single month all by herself, and she closes at 75%. Which most people average around 20 to 30%. So she is double better, if not triple better than almost everybody else in the dental industry. And here's the best part of it all. She recorded her whole process from end to end and broke it into 4 different modulars. And she's going to give you her whole playbook. And for our clients, she's going to give you $2,000 off. All you have to do is go visit fullarchsalesacademy.com and put in the code 2K Full Arch. Again, that's 2K Full Arch, and you'll get $2,000 off. Go check it out. I promise you it'll be worth it. And back to the show. So what is the biggest hang up that you see And I totally agree. So let me back up. First of all, I agree with you. That's one of the biggest things that these clinicians are struggling with because, and I'll tell a little bit of a story, what I've seen over and over and over again is the doctor, especially like GP offices, when they wanted in the past, when they wanted to add a skill clinically to their office, it wasn't that complicated, right? Even adding like single implants was like, okay, well, I'm going to go learn clinically. We're going to get some of the things together, and they start piecing it together. And all the next thing you know, you're doing a lot of single implants, right? And it wasn't this huge shift from a marketing perspective or from a operational perspective. Same with like clear aligners is the same thing. Like there are some complications. Don't get me wrong, but full arch is like a million times harder than that. And from operationally, marketing, everything involved. And so what I've seen happen over and over and over again is the dentist follows their same routine that they've done when they wanted to add procedures to their office is I'm going to go add full arch to my office. They get it going. They do a couple cases of internal referrals and things like that. And then they go, okay, let's turn on the fountain. Let's, throw $20,000 at it. And it just fails miserably because they don't have any checks and balances all the way through. So why do dentists, that's my perspective. So what are your thoughts on why these offices struggle so much with this?
I think a big reason why is, again, they're not a sales organization, right? They're a healthcare office that is used to having patients come to them and to be treated, right? They're not creating, first of all, an experience for the patient. A lot of times you come into dental offices, right? And they still have wallpaper on the walls. They have little random photos of a little puppy playing golf with a goose, like just random things like this that does not exude the professional, hey, this is where you want to spend your money, right?
Oh, man, I can't believe you just called out the poster with the goose and the puppy from like fourth grade.
Yeah. And a lot of offices are still in the stone age of using an analog workflow where they're pouring goopy impression material into patients' mouths to capture what is in that patient's mouth, instead of using a digital workflow. And so a lot of these offices, they get excited about doing full arch. They go to institutes to learn how to do the procedure from a clinical perspective. They might get some coaching here and there. And then they're like, yeah, like you said, hey, let's throw $20,000 in marketing and see what sticks. But when a patient comes in, they're kind of grossed out, to be honest with you. Like, this is not the place that I'm going to spend that money. And there's the offices that are doing the most, right? The 4Ms of the world, the dental GPSs of the world, the Orabells of the world, even Clear Choice, right? They're the ones that really started it all. It's all about the patient experience. I mean, down to the windows. Are the windows clear or are they frosted? Are they in a natural lit environment? Are they not? Do we sit next to the patient in a consultation on a couch, or are we doing more of a transactional conversation sitting across from a desk? And so I think that, the offices that really, they just don't get the fact that we're selling moments and experiences is really what needs to be the focus of things. And the offices that don't do that are the ones that struggle typically the most. And so you gotta look the way that you talk, in a sense.
Yeah. And you know what, I've seen a lot of people do this differently, right? I've seen like the high end technology, they have all the technology, they have everything. It's like very futuristic and they've crushed it. I've also seen little dental offices doing $1 million a month in full arch, with no digital workflow and those kind of things. So there's obviously some level of, you got to have certain things and other things you don't have to have. But so maybe instead of talking about like what people don't have, maybe we talk about like, what are the things, like if I was sitting here and I was a dentist and I was like, oh man, I want to add full arch. Over the last year, I've done 7 arches. They've all been like referred to me. Now I want to start marketing and I want to get going. What would be the list of things that you were like, okay, before you do that, here's like, you got to have these things. Like if you don't have these things, you're not going to be able to make it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You need to identify at least one person who is your person that answers all the incoming opportunities via phone, right? That's their only job. You cannot expect someone who is taking $30,000, $60,000 phone calls to also be doing your sterilization, to also run to Starbucks and get the coffee for everyone. Whoever is
Well, also before you move on to the next point, that this person also, most GP offices don't realize that their staff puts up barriers for their patients coming in. They put up insurance barriers, they put up treatment barriers, they put up all these barriers to prevent certain kinds of patients from coming in. And in full arch, you cannot do that. And if you have the person who's answering your GP calls also doing your full arch, they're going to put up barriers. But also, to your point, they're also busy. So the average unanswered call rate in the dental industry right now during normal business hours is 35%. If you're spending $20,000 on digital marketing for full arch plus TV plus radio or whatever, like, you can't, $35% would be $7,000 of that budget would be washed just because you didn't answer the phone, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah, it is insane. And I don't think most dentists understand that. Again, because in my opinion, dental school has failed most clinicians. They did not go to business school. And they, in terms of efficiencies and workflows and optimizing things, they don't know how to properly identify those gaps that they have. And that's a big issue too, that I think a lot of offices need to address, are those gaps that they don't realize the amount of lost production that they're seeing because they're not able to get to all of these phone calls that are coming in. So again, to continue on that phone call side of things, you got to have at least one person answering the phones every single time, uninterrupted. That's their only job. The second piece of it is also when they finally come into the consultation room, the doctor needs to be present, right? He cannot have the patient waiting 45 minutes to be seen by the one doing the surgery. I call it kind of the magic 5 minutes, right? Some offices call it the golden 5 minutes, whatever you want to call it, but at least 5 minutes of face-to-face interaction, patient with the clinician. Because in terms of how we make decisions as people, right, there's a lot of science out there that says, like, when there's a person of authority, right, and we typically assign doctors as an authority figure, whenever someone is in a position of authority, they have a lot of influence. And so that conversation with the doctor is really what's going to make or break the transaction, right? You have your treatment coordinator, who's your salesperson, who's the closer, but it's really the authority figure in the form of the dentist, the oral surgeon, the periodontist, to come in and have that clinical conversation and ensure them that they're going to be okay.
I've seen people mess this up so stinking bad. I've seen these places where they'll bring the patient in, and before they give them the x-rays and before they talk about the clinical stuff, they'll sit them in the finance office. And they'll be like, all right, let's qualify you basically. Yeah. And then guess what the patient's thinking? How in the world are you giving me prices? You haven't even looked in my mouth. Like, it's just like red flag alert. You can't do that. You have to get them into the chair. They have to have an x-ray and you have to have a conversation. But these dentists are like, I don't want to waste my time on people who aren't qualified. They can't afford the treatment. It's like, it's so backwards, right? Like, it'd be like going in to buy a car, and before you pick a car, they're like, all right, let's sit down and let's look at your credit. We need to be able to get you financed for $100,000. It's like, bro, I haven't even picked a car yet. What if I want the $30,000 base model, or I want the $200,000 one? Like, you're qualifying me. You don't even know what I want yet, or what I need. You don't even know my needs yet. So absolutely. I totally agree with that one. So phones is number one. Number two is that how you seat the patient and have that conversation. I love that. What would be number three?
Yeah, number three is just consistent follow-up. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to convince that patient immediately to accept treatment and to hand over $30,000. They're going to want a price shop. I mean, it's just the world that we live in. They're going to go to at least 2 to 3 offices, most studies show. And so the one that skillfully and articulately follows up with the patient, that's really where the success happens. A lot of times I think as clinicians, we get a little bit prideful in the sense of, well, they need to choose me. I'm not going to beg for dollars, Well, no, yes, you do. You want to make money, right? You need to go after it, and you need to ask for it, and you need to follow up with it. And so
So this
believe,
is what we call in the sales world and every other industry. It's called lead nurturing. You have to nurture the leads because they have a lot of options and there's a lot of questions.
Yep.
And usually people aren't paying on the first appointment. I've seen doctors say that too. Like everybody just has to pay on the first. It's like, that's not how it works. It's like they decide to do it. Then they have to get they have to get their co-signer in, and then they have to, get the financing, whatever it may be. So you have to nurture those leads. And where a lot of people, so I know what a lot of dentists are going to hear when they hear you say, oh, they're going to go to 2 or 3. Well, you may be the third office though, right? And not the only, the other thing is the reason they're going to 2 or 3 is because none of the offices have done a good job with presenting value. Cost is only a issue in the absence of value. When you have value, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a great deal. This is going to change my life. And so if you have a lot of those patients that are creeping out the back end and it's just too expensive, here's what doctors say. Oh, these are bad leads. No. They went and bought full arch from someone, just not from you, because you suck at this. And that is a huge mind shift for dental offices that I've seen. So I love that one. So the lead nurturing, the following up. So you got phones, placement of a patient with the doctor, the lead nurturing. What would be number 4?
Yeah, number 4, again, I think is just the experience piece. So it's typically in terms of getting an extra sale done, I think those 3 steps are really the primary 3. But in addition to that, the 4th one, once you've captured that patient, is to capture their story. You have to interview before and after the procedure, because first and foremost, as human beings, we connect with stories. We do not connect with, oh, this doctor went to USC medical school. Like, they could care less where you got your degree from. I know that might sound a little harsh because you think your pride and joy is where you went to school and how great of a student you were and all that as a credibility source. But it's really fellow patients that resonate with other patients. They want to hear someone that's experienced the same exact traumas they have had the same exact type of pain that they've experienced. Those two in and of themselves, of trauma and pain, is a connector of people. A lot of psychologists call it a trauma bond. And it's really powerful, and it's super important to capture their stories. I was just at the Atlantic Implant Institute in Virginia Beach, Virginia, a couple of weeks ago with Dr. Adam Logan, and he was talking about his own office, and I can vouch this too, working with a couple hundred dental offices in my career, that the average patient who receives treatment will refer at least one other patient. So that's a 30. So for every new patient, instead of just thinking of that as $30,000, think of that as times 2, right? Whatever you got from them, multiply that by 2. And that's truly what the value of that patient is. Now, translate that into them sharing their story to hundreds, if not thousands of other viewers on social media platforms, on their website. Just think of the spiderweb effect of connections that person can create, and the amount of value that capturing that one story is. So, and I think the most important thing is to tie it to dollars missed. One of my clients, right, we took him from 0 arches to 6 arches his first month working with me, to 9 to 10 the second month. So since that point in time, he's done 16. And I asked him, hey, doc, how many of these 16 stories did we capture on video? And he said, none. And it broke my heart, because I'm like, doc, let's tie this to a number. Okay. Those 16 stories, right? Multiply that by the 1 arch per patient, right? 30 grand. It's about $480,000 if my math is right. $480,000, doc, you missed out on because you didn't hit record on your iPhone, right? I think a lot of doctors take pride in like their quality of the video, which I think 100% there's a need for quality marketing in terms of video capture. Of course, yeah. For these testimonials, obviously you can't pay a videographer 16 different times because their schedules are all crazy and busy. But have a decent lighting, and with the iPhone 15s these days, they make fantastic video quality. Just capture a 30-second video, doc, please. Why are they choosing treatment now? What made them choose you as the clinician? And what is this procedure? How is this going to radically impact their relationships interpersonally, their romantic relationships, their job opportunities. How is it going to impact them, not just the way they look, but also financially, and just from a mental health standpoint. Dr. Hogan talks about how getting this procedure done is the equivalent of about 1,000 hours of psychotherapy, right? It changes so much for that patient. So anyways, capture
That's really
stories.
good. I love that. That's really hard. Like dentists it's just hard to do that in every industry. I imagine just getting testimonials is hard, but I love what you brought up there, the trauma bond, and being able to say, even though maybe you haven't had the treatment yourself, you've met enough people that you're empathetic towards them, and that empathy comes across when you talk to somebody. So you're like, hey, Brett, I get what you're going through. We've helped a ton of patients in your exact situation, and I know exactly the road to help you get to where you want to go now and to get you the kind of life that you want. And so that's why full arch is so rewarding, right? Like nobody cries when you give them a filling, right? Or a crown. No one cries. Nope. When full arch, when you change someone's smile, they're crying when you lift that mirror up. So it's really transformative. So this has been really, really good, man. I love that breakdown. The phones, placing the patient, the lead nurturing, and then the trauma bonding in the presentation is amazing. If someone wants to learn more about what you're doing, how can somebody reach out?
Yeah, you can go to my website, www.chirho Consulting, LLC.com. But also I'm a stereotypical millennial. The easiest way to get a hold of me is just shoot me a text message. I can send that to you and just schedule some time. You can
what's your number?
Half hour
if you're okay.
Yeah, it's phone numbers 213-905-9366. And that's honestly the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm also on Instagram, Chi Rho Consulting. Hit me up in my direct messages too, however is convenient for you.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary.